Gregg Wallace has been fired as a presenter of MasterChef UK. There was an investigation in all sorts of inappropriate behaviour which he had displayed over many years on the set of MasterChef, dropping his trousers and revealing the fact that he didn't have underwear except a woolly sock on one occasion, I believe, and groping women who most certainly did not want to be groped, and inappropriate use of language and sexual innuendo and he says it's all nonsense, didn't do any of that, and what he did do was simply a result of his kind of blokish, laddish culture. And more latterly, he's come through in a statement this week and said, I've recently been diagnosed with autism, and BBC TV bosses failed to, quote, investigate my disability and protect me from what I now realize was a dangerous environment. So the BBC should have understood, even though I never told them because I didn't know that I'd been diagnosed with autism, the BBC should have recognized that and should have recognized that my behavior was the result of my autism and taken steps to prevent me from operating in this environment which brought out the worst that my autism... You see how ridiculous it is? Jessie Hewiston joins us now, director of Neurouniverse and author of a book, ADHD, How to Raise a Happy ADHD Child. Jessie, good afternoon. I hope nobody is taking Mr. Wallace seriously with this ridiculous new tack of his.
No, I mean, many are seeing it as an exercise in not what to do when you're in this kind of situation. His comments have angered pretty much everyone, and particularly people from the autistic community who now fear that he's kind of created a really unhelpful suggestion that autistic people behave in a sort of inappropriate way in the workplace.
And I mean, that your autism leads you to... Are there any diagnoses, any conditions, people with autism behaving in the way that Gregg Wallace has now been found by a very thorough inquiry to have behaved?
Yeah, so I'm autistic, and through my work, I work with companies to support autistic and ADHD employees. I have to say I've never encountered, a company that's come to us because an autistic employee is behaving in a sexually inappropriate way or doing any of the stuff that Gregg Wallace has been, found to have behaved in. So no, I don't see the connection really between the autism and this. What I can understand on a human level is potentially he has struggled to connect with people. But even if that is true, being autistic, doesn't mean you get a free pass, and however you behave, if it impacts someone negatively, there aren't consequences. Of course there are. And, again, to your point, there's nothing in the diagnostic criteria that means if you're autistic, you have a propensity to humiliate women.
And it also appeared that the BBC warned him in 2019 and said these things have been reported, they are inappropriate for these reasons, and if you continue to practice these kinds of behaviours, there will be consequences. It took 6 years for those consequences to happen, but so the sort of sense of I had no idea that I had this condition and that this condition was inclining me to behave in this way, and the BBC should have taken responsibility for changing the environment that made it less likely. It's really hard to understand how anybody who claims any degree of intelligence can put that forward as a defence.
Well, the thing is, I suspect, though I don't know, it's a bit of a niche UK legal argument, because in the UK, if an employer has, it is reasonable for them to assume you're autistic, even if the employer hasn't been told, they are, under a duty to support them with their autism. So I feel like it's an argument potentially that's been advanced by his lawyers, but it's not one that I think the vast majority of people are going to agree with. Being autistic doesn't mean you can't wear a belt. I mean, it's ridiculous to say. I mean, he even actually said friends of his, but it is widely assumed it's Wallace himself, have said that the reason why he couldn't, was dropping his trousers and exposing himself was because he can't wear pants due to having a sort of hypersensitivity around textures due to being autistic. None of this really makes sense because, as I said, we shouldn't know whether he wears pants or not. If that's the case, just wear a belt.
Thank you very much, Jessie Hewiston, director of the company that she described, Neurouniverse.